Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Adaptive Insights, a Workday company. Today's topic is your budgeting pre-flight checklist for 2020. We have some great guests today, so we're going to, here in the throes of budget season for most of us, talk a little bit about what's important to get things sorted out for the coming year. Before we get into that, a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, I want to make sure that our audio is working. So if you out there can hear what we're saying, please in the chat window just drop a quick little yes, we can hear you. So we'll give folks a second there to make sure that our audio is working. It's obviously very important. Again, just the chat window on the right-hand side, just drop a quick note that says, yep, we can hear you.
Looks good, Tom. I'm seeing about 50 to 70 responses, so we're good. It's in the questions.
Awesome. Okay. Then there's a technical issue on my side. Jason, can you maybe turn on my Q&A just so I can, because I'm not seeing those. But sounds good. I think everybody can hear us out there. That'll be very important actually as we go through. So if you have questions about what you're seeing, hearing, etc., or technical issues, again, just use that Q&A window to. Thank you, Jason. I can see it now. To ask any questions, and we can kind of address those as we go through here. Also, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with the slides, so don't worry about taking screenshots as we go through here. Okay. With that, I'll get into today's content. Before we do that, a quick safe harbor statement. As a public company, we are required to let you know that we will be making some forward-looking statements potentially, which carry with them risk and uncertainty. So to the extent you're making purchasing decisions, please do so based on the software as it exists today, which is what Todd will be demonstrating later on in the session. With that, I want to introduce some of our panelists and participants today. If you guys wouldn't mind, just a quick hello and your name and kind of company so people get to know who you are and your voice. Jim, do you want to just introduce yourself to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Mitchell. I'm the corporate controller at RATP Dev. For those of you that are not familiar with RATP Dev, we are in the public transportation business where we operate about 20 to 35 contracts throughout the U.S. We have, some of you may be familiar with, we operate our the Austin Cap Metro bus system and also our DC circulator out in Washington, D.C. We do have 2 rail car businesses as well, too. We have about 35 GMs today out in the various remote locations. We've been a user of Adaptive since April. And looking forward to the rest of this presentation. So I'll hand it over to Kerman.
Awesome, Jim. Thanks so much. And Kerman, do you want to do the same? Just a little bit of background and what you're coming at.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Hi, I'm Kerman, part of the Workday FP&A team here. Came to Workday through our acquisition by Workday about a year ago, so I've been collectively here a little bit over 3.5 years. Prior to that, mostly tech and software, Symantec, Veritas. We were just talking about EA just a few minutes ago here in the room because we have some gamers in here, so really cool and really excited to talk about budgeting. We are in the middle of our budgeting cycle. Actually, we were supposed to get our targets yesterday, but we didn't get them, so I'm kind of disappointed, but I guess they're still working on them.
All right, well, we'll talk about calendar and expectations in a minute. Todd, do you want to introduce yourself? Todd's going to be doing our demo later and show us a little bit about what all this looks like in the application.
Yes, thank you. I'm what we call a solution consultant. So my responsibilities is to work closely with the sales team and showcase the product. And then ultimately, as you move forward to make your decision, I work closely with our implementation team to make sure we can meet your requirements as we go through. I've been doing this role for just coming on 5 years at Adaptive, and I'm working and supporting the Bay Area team here locally.
Thanks, Todd. And that's me over on the far right there. I actually spent most of my time at Adaptive with Kerman on the FP&A team, so building board packs and fighting with stakeholders and putting reports and building models. Last year, moved over to the product marketing team, so have a hand now in what we want and need from the application going forward. So I'll kind of moderate today, and we'll get a little bit of insight from Jim and Kerman, and then kind of see what some of this all looks like in actually a demo. Todd's going to actually open up the application and kind of walk through some various things. So, and again, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, but please, as we go through, don't hesitate to drop your questions into the little chat window there, and we can kind of address them as they come up. Okay? All right. Well, Jim, and again, you kind of gave us a little bit of kind of the story at RATP, but if you want to find a little bit more just in terms of the color of the business, some of the things you wrestle with as an organization, and then kind of maybe just your latest journey with planning, kind of what you were looking at beginning of the year, what caused you to make a decision and put a piece of system in place around that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. So as mentioned before, we have adopted Adaptive Insights, went live in April of this year. Obviously, the planning process for us is completed for this year, but we had, prior to implementing Adaptive Insights, we used another FP&A tool that was very Excel-based. I'm sure most of the listeners out there are very familiar with that. Was not very easy to use, wasn't very easily changeable, couldn't integrate with it. So we made a decision to move over to Adaptive. Our business is a very RFP-driven business. So part of one of the high priorities for us is that we had some adaptability and to do what ifs in our plan and our forecasting. So that is very big for us. We're a growing company. Hierarchy changes, new business development. So that was all very important for us. Our first phase we rolled out in April was for reporting. So we do all of our reporting here at RATP Dev for the US through Adaptive. We integrated with our ERP system, pull in transactions on the hour. Really has given us the ability to look into our business on a daily basis, drill down into transactions, which was a need that our business leaders and our general managers needed. We also implemented KPIs. We've done a 2020 budget that we've gone complete end-to-end cycle on, and then we're big also users of Office Connect as well too, which is something that the FP&A team is using to design board decks and just really from an external reporting standpoint as well too. So that's a little bit about where we've been and where we are today.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jim, and we'll show folks kind of what the Office Connect piece is that haven't seen it. Basically, a plug-in into Microsoft Office, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. A couple of questions popped up here, Jim. What are you guys using on the ERP GL system side that sort of are actuals? Where is that coming from? Can you talk just a little bit about that from a systems perspective?
Yeah, we use Microsoft Navision, which is we have for 6 legal entities that we utilize, and we integrate with each legal entity. Okay, no, makes sense. And that's true of most folks that get up and going with Adaptive. They'll source of actuals for the general ledger is sort of obviously a big part of planning, not only because you're going to base sort of future plans on the actual results, but also then that budget versus actual exercise that most FP&A and finance teams have to undertake. That obviously involves grabbing the ERP and actuals data from wherever that is, putting it alongside the planning stuff. And so, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in different scenarios, but long story short, pretty much every ERP system that's out there now that, Adaptive we're getting close to sort of 5,000 customers, we've dealt with, seen, in some form or flavor before. All right, Jim, well, that's awesome.
one other question, just from a like timing and cadence perspective, what sort of fiscal year cycle are you guys on, and how does that inform when you sort of have, sort of peak season and that kind of thing from a budget and collaboration perspective and putting together the annual plan?
Yeah. So for us, we're a January to December fiscal year. We do 2 forecasts a year, and then obviously we go through one budget cycle, which I mentioned we just finished. It's a pretty early process here at this company, obviously. But we do so for us, our peak season, because we're finishing forecast 2 and also starting to do a budget for the following year, is about from June through August. So yeah, in the past, I would say it would probably be a 6-week cycle to get a budget completed, and I'm gonna say, without knowing exactly, but we've probably cut that down to 3 to 4 weeks in that process for us the first go around, and expect to see improvements for next year as well.
And so what did you do with the other? You just sort of took some PTO in the other weeks, or
yeah, we got
what
to go.
were you
We
doing?
got to go home.
Put the
We
feet
got
up
to go
on the
home. We got to go home early a couple times.
Okay. All right, Jim. Well, listen, we're going to dig a little more on a couple of those themes, but I kind of want to get down into it. That's helpful context in terms of how you approach things. I want to talk a little bit for a second on objectives, both from a sort of organizational perspective as well as kind of finance perspective. Can you talk a little bit about what's important? You mentioned figuring out where we sit with a bunch of the big contracts and what's kind of coming in. Can you talk a little bit about how you start at the top level in terms of setting the goals and objectives for kind of coming year or forecast period?
Yeah, so we have KPIs that we've established for the business, and really kind of starts there and sort of ends there as well too. But we built budget from the bottoms up for the year, and then obviously meeting KPIs and coming in at our targets for KPIs was probably our end result for us as well. So we budget all the way down to each of our operating contracts and our management contracts. So there's a total of about 35, 20 operating, 15 management contracts. Each of the GMs have full accountability and responsibility for their budgets, and we have an FP&A team that provides support to each of them from a business partner perspective.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. And Kerman, you were complaining a little bit earlier about not getting targets. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that process works on the Workday and kind of Adaptive side? How you guys are telling it?
Yeah, so on the planning side, we actually started the planning process back in August. We're a January fiscal year end, and it starts with the strategic planning piece of it, which is kind of less financial, more kind of business strategy, talking about from each function, and then out of that comes our 3-year long range plan. And then right now we're in the taking that 3-year plan and then creating the 1-year operating plan. And a lot of it, and Tom, really familiar now, Workday rolled out what we call OKRs, objectives and key results, last year or this year. And we've been going, it's our 3rd quarter now on it, and it really helps us focus around what are the objectives for each of the functions. Corporate has a set of objectives, and each of those objectives then has what we call key results or KPIs that help us measure and track those things. And yeah, I did mention that I just slacked our corporate FP&A team asking, hey, how come we didn't see the targets? But our targets were supposed to have come out yesterday, and that would have been kind of our official, at least to me, kind of the official start of our operating plan cycle. And then November would kind of be our, that would be the meat of all of the stuff that we would do as part of a bottoms-up process, which we're a part of now as a BU of Workday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of good things there, and actually I like the the concept of kind of tops down and bottoms up. We sort of talk with a lot of customers and sort of experience some of this ourselves. I think one of the interesting things is I've seen folks build that sort of flexibility and sort of coming at it from multiple directions directly into their models. So, you have maybe one mechanism that's kind of coming tops down where you're putting in growth rates and targets, another that's built at a much more granular from a bottoms up perspective, individual, head count and people and line items of, on CapEx, et cetera. And I see folks kind of triangulate. So they'll come at both and identify gaps where, maybe the on the ground plan isn't sort of stacking up with, where the targets need to be. Another point you raised there around Adaptive as sort of a business unit, we had a question come in from the audience. Is Adaptive a standalone solution or is it integrated with Workday, and how does that all work? Great question. So first and foremost, Adaptive can be used standalone with any sort of ERP system out there, and with 5,000 customers, live on the platform, the vast majority of those who are not Workday users on either the HCM or financial side, yes, you can use that with whatever transactional systems you have in place, and that's kind of for a planning platform to be effective. It needs to be able to talk and ingest data from wherever source systems are coming from, both on the general ledger, HR, CRM, whatever systems are in place. All of that said, there are some obvious advantages to being able to do that on an integrated platform, and that was part of the thesis for Workday's acquisition of Adaptive, basically to take some of that integration headache and having to move data around off of the plate of customers and to kind of handle that for them. So great question there. And again, don't hesitate to drop those into the chat as they come up. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the people and collaboration process that you guys go through. Maybe we talk to Jim, we'll start with Jim here first. You mentioned you've got the GMs of the various contracts or municipalities involved in kind of owning, but can you talk a little bit about what was involved in standing that up and kind of what that's accomplished for you in terms of accountability and ownership?
Yeah, so we had this in place prior to as Adaptive as well too, but with Adaptive it enabled us to be a little bit more flexible, and GMs having the ability to be in one place and do their budget, print out reports or run reports right away. But our general managers have access to all of that. When we stood it up, we went through a pretty significant training with the team over the course of this first quarter, prepared them, designed your canned generic reports for them, and just your normal actuals versus variance type reporting, but really to give them the ability to own. I feel like you've got to have them engaged in using the tool, and one of the things we found, as I mentioned before, was the ease of use of Adaptive for them was greater than the tool that we had before, and that was important because if it's frustrating for them, they're not going to use it. What I found with Adaptive is that was real easy to use. What ifs were real easy. You could change things in the model and the budget, and just hit refresh, and you'd get a result, and you could change it back. So it's been the same people were involved prior to as they are now, but they've just been more engaged in the process.
I know that's great. And Kerman, do you want to talk a little bit? So I know you guys took this kind of to a bit of an extreme this year in terms of some of the surveying you did. Can you talk a little bit about the polling you guys did and kind of what you found and how that sets you up for things you want to accomplish and do differently in the coming year?
Yeah, so this year, one of our objectives was to get a kind of a pulse for how we're doing as a finance organization around our business partnering. And one of the things that came out of that objective was to do a survey, and we sent it to all of our business partners, about 180 of our business partners, not just at the executive level, but all, at the actual budget manager level. And we basically polled them and asked them how we were doing. And two things came out of it. One was, we had to do a better job around the planning process, which was very timely, because then we were able to change how we did our, communicated for the plan. So specifically around calendars, making sure that we were clear around the calendar, what the dates were, what the deliverables were, and making sure that that was, visible to everybody that was involved in the planning process. And then additionally, they wanted more transparency around how targets were set. And so I think corporate spent a little more time on meeting with the stakeholders, talking about what the long range plan looked like, and then what were the assumptions going into the operating plan. And so those are the big feedback. And then the second one, I guess, unrelated to planning, was around reporting. And so how do we get more self-service reporting, and how do we make it easier for our business partners to access information that they need in order to do their day-to-day. And the idea around getting people involved, communicating, being a better business partner, all surrounds kind of our desire of getting to know what the experience our business partner is having, and then how do we encourage our finance team to improve on the areas that that come out of it. And so I think we did a better job this year on the planning process. Definitely, I think there's been better transparency. And then as we're moving to reporting, I think, some of the things that we'll see later in the demo, we've been really rolling, web reporting, as well as Office Connect has really kind of changed how in finance we've doing reporting. But I think that will have, longer term effects on the, positive effects on the overall organization as we move forward.
Got it. It makes sense there. We talked a little bit about calendars, both of you guys. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit more around the target setting? Because actually we had a question come in, which I think is pretty good. So I get it conceptually in terms of, setting targets and communicating those to businesses. Can you talk about how that manifests itself in Adaptive? Is that stuff you're building out explicitly? Are you using that? Can you talk a little bit there, Kerman?
Yeah, well, interestingly, or not interesting, but this is the first year that we ran the LRP model through Adaptive. So prior to that, it was in a spreadsheet. Rob and our corporate FP&A team spent time building out our LRP model in Adaptive this year.
LRP being a long range plan.
Yeah, the long range plan. And for us, it's 3 years. Other companies might go out to 5 years. I had an interesting conversation with a company that went out 10 years, and I said, that's no longer an LRP, I think. That's kind of like extended, whatever. But it's typically 3 to 5. We do 3 years. And, speaking to Rob, he said that it's been transformational for him and his team because they're able to run the model so much easier, right? So if let's say our ARR target change or our submission change, they're able to run that straight through not only the income, not only through revenue, but get to the bottom line and get to, even balance sheet and cash flow now. And so it's really helped them speed up their cycle, that they can then get to, our CFO and the other executive committee, kind of the results of the things that they're seeing from the business, how that impacts the overall financials. And that really goes to our target setting process, because what happens is you get this three-year model, and then you're focused on the operating plan. And because we're a public company, they're looking at things that they've already told the street, kind of what the expectations are. And so all of that wraps into this target setting process. And, just based on my conversations with Rob over the last couple of weeks, getting the LRP, getting the long range plan into Adaptive has been, a real big positive change for him and his team, and kind of the cycle that we're going through.
Got it. And so have you done that just a whole separate area within the application, or how did you render it, quite literally?
So it's it's on the same instance as our bottoms up model. So it's all connected. Okay. But it gives him the ability to move certain levers. So it's not bottoms up for certain pieces, but they can also borrow from the main model if they want.
Got it. That makes sense. And Jim, do you want to get back over to you for a little bit? Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the reporting? You mentioned that earlier. But talk to me about the sort of flow of data from origination into the transaction system, bringing that into planning, the comparison. You talked about being able to drill into transactions and answer questions, and then kind of pushing that out. Talk to me about how you set that up and what you accomplished there.
Yeah, so we've done, as I mentioned before, we have we've designed an integration with our ERP system that pulls in all the transactional data. And this is probably overkill, but we have an integration that happens every hour. It's not that it's real necessary, but
okay.
we designed it that way, and it works well. And that transactional data then becomes available in our Adaptive Insights, and you can you run a report. You want to compare your actuals versus your budget or your forecast. It's just allows you to do a real easy double click into the transactional data, get to a invoice number level, and then from there, what our next plan is to do is to integrate being able to get to the actual invoice itself from that standpoint. So we've been real successful, and that was one of our big initiatives and a priority is that we would integrate with the ERP system. And then we've just designed, we have monthly reports that go into our monthly business review that we've generated. And as I mentioned before, we set up a deck in our Office Connect that essentially you change date ranges, change your dates for the month, and do a refresh, and you've created a board deck, for example, which has just saved us a tremendous amount of time, because prior to that we were using, as everybody else is familiar with, Excel spreadsheets and cut and pasting them in the PowerPoint presentation. And so that's just given us a lot more time to do analysis during the month as well.
That sounds great. And I think actually, Jim, on that note, let's dive into the application and let Todd kind of show us some of what this looks like. And we'll give you guys the opportunity to kind of provide a little color commentary as we go along here. So Todd, I am turning over control to you. You should be the presenter now, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing your screen and maybe logging into Adaptive, we can get a feel for what this looks like in the application.
All right, Tom.
Okay,
let
Todd,
me know
so I can see your login screen. You are all set to go.
All right. Okay, we're ready for takeoff. So let's do that. Before I jump in, today we only have a few. We're going to be a little bit short on our typical presentation window, so we'll highlight the key things. Just know you can come and join us every Wednesday. We have a weekly a demonstration via a webinar at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then also, if you really like what you see, please reach out and we'll connect you with our local sales teams. We'd love to come in and really get into the details of how the product works and how we can help you with your budgeting cycle. So first things first, I'm going to log in. We have 3 different types of classification of users. So as you think about your implementation, as Jim was mentioning, reaching out to different types of team members, we come in and you can either be one of 3 categories. One, I'm coming in today as a power user. This will typically be your finance team. They can go anywhere in the application, see anything, do anything, have all the open privileges. You also can invite in what we call the classification of a contributor. So if you want your managers to log in and participate in the budgeting cycle, these are team members that will come in and be able to run reports, look at dashboards, but they also can update and make adjustments to the budget numbers themselves. And then the third category would be what we call a view-only user. And these commonly are perhaps the executives that aren't going to touch the numbers, but need to see where they're at and perhaps where they're going and what are some of the historical values. And so they don't actually touch the numbers, but they can pretty much see their key related details. As I come in today, we'll come over here to the navigation window. We'll introduce you to the interface. And so today we're going to highlight just really on 3 big areas. Today we're going to introduce you to the concept of models. We call these sheets. So think of them as your Excel spreadsheets. We're basically taking that exact same logic from Excel and bringing it up into the cloud and organizing them and then making them work together to ultimately roll your financial budgets together. We also have something what we call assumptions. In the Excel paradigm, think about these as your VLOOKUPs. These are simply just tables where we can go put things in one location. So if we make a change to that value, it can ripple through all the models, and you don't have to go to each individual formula to update those values as they're seeing their connections. We'll spend a few minutes today in reporting. We've got two different types of reporting. We have what we call an HTML web report engine. This is where you're going to, as we give you a lot of time back, as we automate a lot of the sort of manual data crunching tasks, you're going to be able to spend a lot more time doing analysis. And this is where we see our customers going off and being able to quickly build reports, ask questions, get answers, and share them with the management team. Discovery is where we manage our dashboards. This is where we're going to start today. And then we've got some other areas that we won't cover today, but just know we've got a built-in workflow engine. So as you want to route these around these budgets for approval, we can support you there. We also have the administration area here, including our integration tool, where again, this is where we're going to connect to your ERP systems. And in Jim's case, they're bringing them over, on a very frequent basis. Adaptive, we bring ours over typically around every night at midnight. Our CRM system typically refreshes 3 times a day, just to give you some perspective on the different ways we go through. And then administration is where we manage the users, you add users and so forth. And then modeling is the area where you actually build the models and support them. Our goal, of course, is as we do the implementation, in parallel, we're going to train you up on how to be able to own and manage and support these models. So one of the things that Adaptive really is known for in the market is our ease of use, so that the financial teams can manage these going forward. You don't have to call up IT to make changes or adjustments to the models. You'll be able to go in and do them yourselves with confidence and ability to support them going forward. We'll start out with the end game in mind here. This is dashboards. So our solution has kind of 2 categories or 2 classifications. One is personal. So you as a user, depending on your authorization, can come in and see your own dashboards, build whatever you want, do whatever you want, of course, accordingly. And then eventually, as you build them out, you're going to want to share and publish these to other team members. And if you look down at my variety of a list here, you can see I've got a company summary, one for consolidations. I set one up just for my dedicated cost centers. The executives have their own. The financial team, of course, has theirs. HR maybe has a set, and even sales. So wherever you are in the business, you can dedicate these dashboards that are unique to their business processes to allow them to see the key things to assess where they're at and where they're going. And most importantly, with dashboards and visualization, is to look at trends to make sure if you need to make any course corrections, you might know exactly where to go to make those adjustments. The good news is if you're already using Excel for doing a lot of charts and graphs, we more or less can give you that same framework. All of our gauges and dials really map closely to how Excel works today. The big thing that's different for us, though, is this is one embedded solution. So one of the nice things about Adaptive is we're 100% in memory. What that means is if you make a change in your models and you hit save, it's automatically going to show up here on your dashboards. It's automatically going to show up on your reports or anywhere else in the model. Is that when you make that change, those values are refreshed in real time. And that differentiates us in the market, because some of the other technologies require syncing, or maybe they even have third-party tools to give you the same capability. But Adaptive, you're a one-stop shop. Everything's embedded in here, and it's all available at the save button, if you will. If I hover over here, you can see.
Hey, Todd, can I just interrupt you just for a quick sec? Because I think, yep. Kerman, do you mind just talking a little bit? Because you guys internally made a whole lot of headway with rolling out sort of dashboards, at least on the Adaptive side. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of what was behind that and what that did for you guys?
Yeah, so what Todd's actually showing you is kind of the model that we had around doing our quarterly business reviews and some of our management reviews. Everyone is probably familiar with putting PowerPoint decks together for your quarterly business reviews, and we did that for a little while after I got here, and then we decided that, why don't we use the visualization technology that we have to do it, because the biggest difference is that PowerPoint is static, and what you're seeing in front of you is dynamic in the sense that in the meeting you could go to any one of these charts and you can change the time, right? You see March here, you can change it to April. And on the trend chart, you could change it from, January, you can change it from 2019 to, let's say, 2 years. And that always happened, and that really changed the discussion around these meetings was, oh, what did it look like 4 quarters ago? And we could change it on the fly. So it really changed the way that the meetings were run. And then the benefit for finance was we didn't have to put together PowerPoints, and that was always a big positive. And we're doing the same thing at Workday now. So Workday, I think we mentioned, I heard board reports earlier. They've done that. They've taken all their management packs and quote unquote automated it using Office Connect. But now they're going into discovery or the visualization piece of this and doing similar things that we did at Adaptive. And I'm confident that we'll see the same results, which is more time back to finance, not creating PowerPoints, but richer discussion in the management meetings, because you don't have to stop and someone go look up something or change a chart or something. You can do it right in the meeting, and you get a lot of benefit from that.
Thanks, Sherman. Sorry, Todd.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and so as we show you the interactive capabilities of our charts here, these are what we call KPI charts. So you typically use these when you kind of have a known target and you want to see how well you're doing against your budgetary window here. So you can see I'm hovering over this item and it says net revenue AC. So these are actuals coming over for the month of March from the general ledger, your GL system, your ERP system. And then we're comparing that to our budgetary target numbers here. You can see I'm off about 10% or so. So again, maybe that makes sense, or maybe you need to make adjustments. And then these KPI charts are nice because you can get a little mini chart here looking back 12 months. So you get a trend going. It's currently, these are all interactive. So we can break these across different time structures. Month, quarter, year are very common for our planning teams, financial teams. We do have some customers. I work with manufacturing customers to look at weekly buckets. So it really kind of just depends on the process. We work with PF Chang's. PF Chang's looks at daily, so we can even go down to look at daily statuses for some of the top line items that you might be assessing within the business here. All these charts are interactive in the sense that you can do two things. One is you can slice across your key business dimensions. You can see here our common ones are like customer. If you click on that, since our solution is 100% in memory, we automatically know the drill path. So you don't have to go write secondary charts or programs or scripts to know how to go from that one click, slice it by dimension now, and I can see customer 1, 3, and 2 are leading the way across these different items. In fact, what is customer 1? What are some of the products they're purchasing? Again, one more click, we automatically know where to drill down into these items. So when you set up your model for the first time, you're going to want to explore the different types of dimensions that you use to roll up your business. The other very powerful feature that differentiates on the market here is what we call our Cell Explorer. This gives us the ability to do one click and I can jump right down to the intersection of this data. And what this is telling me here is here's an account net revenue for the total level at the top level of company. For the month of March, I can see how those revenues are coming in across my legal entities. I can do one more click and now I'm going to drill down one more level and I can see how it slices into my operations team and then across my sales regions. You get the idea. You now have the ability to keep drilling down, but never fear, you're never lost. With one more click, you can go right to where our data models live. So again, just to show you the interconnectivity between our dashboards and the models themselves here. And we'll talk a little bit more about models in a moment, but just wanted to highlight the capabilities we have to be able to slice and dice across the different models themselves. A couple other important features. We're going to go ahead and use the same hierarchy structure that you typically would set up in your ERP system. So you can just see here, eventually you're going to come down to your lowest level, whether it's departments or cost centers. The benefit for you is you now can set these dashboards up, but they can work a lot like templates. So when users log in, depending on their security and their role, we can align them to, say, Cost Center Manager 101. So when she logs in, she will see this exact same dashboard, but she's only going to see it at this hierarchy structure. So this is what we call role-based security, where you now can take control and determine where team members can go and what particular data sets they can see and interact with. If you're a company that has lots of different currencies around your budgeting cycle, we've got built-in currency exchange tables that we can manage behind the scenes. So team members, let's say if you're part of the Canadian team, could log in and see everything in Canadian dollars. Another very powerful, important feature that Adaptive uses is the concept of versions. So you can see here, if I expand a couple of these versions, we can now drill down here. Adaptive uses versions, and just to kind of give you a parallel to the Excel world, versions are a lot like a workbook. So a workbook typically has many different worksheets, and they're all interacting and working together. Well, that's exactly the same thing we do here, but we just call them a version. We've got two different types. One is actuals. Most of our customers use actuals and bring them over from the source systems. Those are systems of record. So most of our customers, I'd say the majority of them, they don't change those values. They're, in our case, in our models, they're presented in a unique font green, and that they're just referenced for you. So you have your actuals, and then you can do things like to compare them to your current budget. The nice thing about Adaptive is we don't have a heavy burden on data management. So you can have as many versions as you need to support your business process. You can see I'm keeping my last year's budget. Notice there's a little lock icon right next to that. So you have the ability to lock these down so you can reference them, but just know that no one's going to be able to go in and make changes to that particular budget cycle. Or as Jim was mentioning, or as Kermit as well, you can do a targets number. So when the targets come in, you can use that as the baseline. And then maybe that morphs into budget pass 1. And today I'm using, in the bold case here, we're using a working budget as sort of my rolling forecast. So as each month I close the books, I can keep moving my pointer forward to incorporate my actuals and overlay those over the budgetary numbers. But you can notice here I've got a lot of what-if scenarios. In fact, they've got a special what-if bucket down here. This is a nice thing about Adaptive is you can make a copy of these versions. My demo model takes about 20 seconds to copy an entire version. And then that gives me the ability to go do what-if scenarios. So on that copied version, I can say, what if we hire more people? What if we make more sales? In essence, ask those questions and then compare them to your baseline budget to see the overall impact, saying, is that a good decision, or maybe are we heading in the wrong direction? And then from there, you also can then plot multiple versions right on these charts. So today's example, we've got the darker green is actuals for running through the month of April, which is my demo model. Then we've got the lighter green, which is last year's numbers. And then you can see the red bar here represents our budget cycle. So that's the window I'm trying to align to, where then I can keep track of where I'm going and what I need to see. And as we go through and look at some other examples, probably one of our most popular charts is waterfall charts, built in right here, very easy. I know in the Excel world, at least it used to be a little bit more of a pain, but so much easier for you just to drag these items on here. And then that gives you the ability to then have your key dimensions and do a baseline comparison, and then look at those adjustments by different, in this case, regions, to see how it impacts your overall forecast. So dashboards are very compelling because, again, complete drag and drop environment, no specialized programming skills, and you're off and running. You can go ahead and pretty much set up whatever you want and then publish them out to the various team members. Okay, so that's dashboard. Moving along.
Hey, Todd. Hey, maybe just before you jump off there, is it possible to just hit edit and show somebody what's entailed in like spinning up one of those?
Yeah. Just to give you an idea, again, the paradigm is so easy. If I go to my own dashboards, this is my own personal sandbox. If you're authorized, you can click on the edit button, and what this will open up is the designer. So over on the left side here, if we just go down and find a clear space here, we want to drag an item on here. If I just maybe drag a column chart on here, you can see I drag it right on there, and then we can give it a size and shape that kind of follows along with the same structure here. And then since everything's 100% in memory, I can go to all my accounts and I can pull over any value I want, whether it's my GL accounts or maybe some metrics. In fact, let's just grab a few metrics over here. Maybe just bring in gross margin, bring in our EBITDA numbers here, and then net income. You can see how easy it is. It automatically represents and builds this chart out. Then over on the right side, you can give it a name and personalize it. So we'll call it metrics. You can work with your access controls and legends just like you would in Excel. move this out of the way, and then we can go and then give it some additional data. So if I wanted to bring in maybe additional versions or more accounts, I could just highlight those. How do I want to organize the data sets? How do I want to sort the data sets? A lot of flexibility here, again, to build a lot like you would in an Excel paradigm. And then finally here, you can choose how you want to leverage the time structures, as well as maybe your horizons here. Is it a single period, or is it a full year, or do you want to look at 2-year trending, whatever it is. And then when you're done, you just click on done, and voila, you've built your first chart. And then now, since we know where to go and what to do, you can now slice it across your key dimensions, as well as drill into the individual data behind the model itself.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, that's great for folks. Just wanted to kind of demystify some of what's involved there in terms of creating them. Super helpful.
Let's go into our next area that we wanted to highlight today, which is we call them sheets. But again, think of sheets as models. This is where all of our calculations are taking place. So Adaptive, we've got a lot of built-in financial intelligence to make your lives easier, so you don't have to build this from the ground up. Our 3 most common areas that we pull all these data sets together to support is your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow. So these are sort of our financial gauges, if you will, to assess the business and how it's going. But then you've got all kinds of other models: operating expenses, workforce planning. We'll show you an example in a moment. A lot of our customers do top line. So if you've got some unique things around your top line revenue models, we can help you with capital planning. Adaptive, we bring in travel commitments for a given year. A lot of our customers have significant vendor contracts they need to manage. Whatever it is, here's a CRM. We can bring in our pipeline data. I work with manufacturing companies that bring in their inventory commitments. Whatever it is, we can bring those data sets in and build them and represent them into a model. Let's introduce the most common one we set up typically in our phase 1. And when I say phase 1, our customers, they often will roll their models out as fast as they can, obviously, to gain a lot of benefits, but they may break their implementations into phases so that they don't have to wait like you typically do with an ERP implementation. You can start having the benefits, whether it's reporting or dashboards or the models themselves. Maybe phase 1 would be building the P&L. Phase 2 might be your balance sheet and your cash flow. What we're looking at here is a model. Over here on the left side is all my accounts. You'll notice that these should closely represent how typically customers set up their GL structure. So for the P&L, we try to usually map that pretty closely to that structure. And then across the top is our time elements here. So most of our customers, again, in the financial world, go down to months. You can see here 2018, if that's coming through on your end as a green font, that means they're historical actuals. So in today's demonstration model, when I reference my version working budget, which is my rolling forecast, I click on this filter item right here. Each individual user can choose how they want to lay out their data sets here. So you can see FY 2018 was my last year's numbers. I only want to show the annual total here. I can view it however I want, but I'm showing the annual total. 2019 is, I wanted to see my budget forecast in the month-to-month detail. And then 2020 is a future projection where I'm just going to show the year, at least for my budget planning window here. So each user can choose how they want to break these data sheets down. And then just know over on the left side here, you summarize all this information. So in my case, I've got 3 different revenue models here for product, for service, and for maintenance. So again, the adaptive paradigm, you could have as many models as you need, and we can roll those all the way back to the P&L. And then you can see here, we're bringing in our cost of goods sold, backing those out. And eventually we'll come down here and we're going to calculate the contributing margins. So we do all the totals and the aggregations for you, but we can even put metrics right on here as well. So KPIs or metrics are common. In this case, you can see I got my contributing margins here. I can just display those as they roll through here. And then the next area here, we see our operating costs. So we've got payroll, taxes and benefits, office expenses, things around rental space or lease space commitments. We can even bring in your depreciation schedules, whether they're both existing or new assets that you want to model for future investments. As I mentioned here, we've got our T&E, so we can do T&E. Adaptive, we bring in our marketing projections, and then eventually you come down here, you get to your EBITDA numbers. Again, as an EBITDA percent here, back out your non-operating. And then my model today, I'm bringing in net income to represent some of the key things that we use to do side-by-side comparisons of models. So again, models are very powerful, very easy for us to work with. Let's show you how you would interact with one. So let me jump down to expenses. So again, these are pretty common for most companies that are set up their operating expenses. Notice here I'm at the very top level of company. As a power user, I can see all, I can drill all, I can go anywhere across the business. But let me drill down to Cost Center 101. And what we'll do here is we'll show you what it'd be like for that manager to come into the system and be able to review their numbers and actually make adjustments. So there's kind of two different things to consider here. Notice here, payroll and taxes. If I hover over here, if I look at, say, that 38K, there's a little blue triangle below that, but you can see the little hover over bar represents that this cell is locked. And we do this by design, because we have a secondary model that's doing all these calculations. These are coming from our workforce management, our workforce planning system here for our personnel. So we take our personnel model, and then we do all the calculations behind the scenes, and then I aggregate them across for Cost Center 101 and bring them right here. In fact, if I click on that cell, you can see up on the left side, it says equal ACCT personnel dot salary. So what this is telling me, it's going to my personnel model, and it's bringing over the salary calculation from that individual model. And so as I mentioned earlier, one of our features here is the ability to drill into that cell. So one click now, and I can go see what's behind that data intersection here. So if I hover over here, 6110, Cost Center 101 for the month of January is 38K. It's going to my personnel sheet, and it's bringing over the salary calculations. And depending on your security levels and your access, I can actually drill into that 38K to see what's behind that number. And now what this is going to do is it's going to show me, if I hover over back here, we can see Parker Lee all the way through William Clark. We're taking their annual salaries, dividing them by 12, and coming up with their monthly rates here that ultimately come up, and I aggregate those to 38K, or with one more click, I can go right to my personnel model. And as we drill down here, this now is going to introduce you to another model concept that we use to make it very easy for us to create a column row list here to show me my team members. You can see we've got some new hires here, their titles, their residency. You can put freeform comments in. Here's where we turn on and off their salaries. So start date is when we turn on the salaries, end date if you have team members leaving or changing teams, their work rates. We can get very granular, and we can model in health benefits. Here's where the pay rate is defined. So I take this pay rate and divide it by 12, which ultimately is giving them my January calculation. We can do things for sales teams like commission targets or bonuses. We can even share team members. You can see our friend William Clark here is shared between two different cost centers. And all these calculations are...
Can I interrupt you just for a sec? I just maybe give Jim a quick opportunity. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about, Todd's kind of flashed through expense planning, headcount now, talked a little bit about some revenue stuff. Do you want to just talk about what was important for you guys in terms of being able to model or render?
Yeah, sure. Our biggest priority was becoming more standardized, if you will, across the board, right? So everybody was using the same benefit rates. They were using, in the personnel model, it was a little bit more controlled, where in the past it was not. But we, similar to what Todd is showing, we put together personnel sheets where we imported our actual headcount and people and salaries and wages and into Adaptive, and then created some benefit assumptions for our health and welfare. And then in addition to that, we have a revenue model as well too, which we utilize. So very similar to what Todd was showing, which, it was the baseline for us, and it was real basic, but it was something that our, like I mentioned before, our goal was to be able to control more what the field was using, and we used, trended rates, actual rates, and put that out there for them to where they couldn't use it. The drivers were their number of people or their new hires and such. So that way it gives a little bit more validity, to your plan as well too, for us, and that was important.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And Todd, just cognizant of time here, and I think it's important maybe to pop over to Office Connect just to show some of the reporting output. Assuming, we kind of render the model and the plan here, are able to ingest actuals. Can you kind of show what, how you wire up that output? So one option is obviously those dashboards that we were showing before that Kerman was talking about. But, can you kind of show what Jim has done in terms of wiring up like a border management pack there with Office Connect? Thanks.
So typically a couple of team members will have our Office Connect plugin installed on their local computer. So obviously you need Microsoft Office, but then we've got special plugins we use to allow us to do two things. One is I can render those same expense sheets locally on my computer. I can make adjustments to the values and push them up to the cloud. And the other plugin is I can now connect to the Adaptive Cloud and bring those numbers down into my local Excel file and then refresh those and connect them up to Word and PowerPoint. So here's our Office Connect plugin. And if I go over here, you can see here's all of those key accounts we were playing with earlier, whether it's revenues or operating expenses. You just highlight that item, figure out where you want to put it, and you can drag it right here onto the Excel file, and in essence create that same equivalent report. Most of our customers work the other way though. They go to an existing report that their management team knows and loves, and all they need to do is then overlay the values that would come from Adaptive. So here's an example. If I go to a formatted example here, you can see I have March actuals going back 6 months, plus March is my budgetary number. If I illuminate the Adaptive cells, the green cells are labels and time periods coming over from the model, and then the blue cells are calculations, whether it's revenues all the way through. We can even bring over sums and totals, but just know you can use all the other cool Excel features, including overriding your titles. Or if I go over here to cell 05, we're actually using an Excel formula. So this gives you the best of both worlds. And then in the end, once you close the books, the management team and the accounting team says we're good to go, then you just come over here to your board book properties, and you can say, well, okay, we just closed the books at the end of April. And this is what our customers love, is once the books are closed, they click on that new time window. They say, okay, go and refresh all my data, and watch, voila, we're going to log into our model. We're going to refresh our data, and now we're going to have our entire April data set mapped exactly into this report. You can save it locally, and then share it with the management team, and then you're off for the beach for the weekend or whatever fun events you're going to go through here. And you can see we can do that for metrics, we can do that for charts and graphs. And then what we'll do is we'll use these charts and graphs, and then we'll create a link relationship to our Office Connect plugin in PowerPoint so that we can automatically refresh the PowerPoint so you have the latest and greatest April data that it maps through. Okay, Tom, I think we're there. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, no, that's super super helpful, and we are getting to the top of the hour. So with that, I want to thank Jim and Kerman for their insight and commentary. Very, very helpful as we kind of work through the throes of budget season now for most of us. And Jim, glad to hear you guys are already done and have your feet kicked up on the desk. So that's nice. We all should be so lucky. And no, seriously, thank you, Jim and Kerman. And with that, Todd as well for the demo. We'll close it out. And for folks, I got to most of the questions that were filing up there, but any that wouldn't, just drop us a note and reply, and they're happy to kind of get stuff. Okay. Well, thanks so much, and we'll call it for today.